So, as a kid growing up in South Central Los Angeles, Joe Ide's favorite books were the Conan Doyle Sherlock Holmes stories. The idea that a person could face the world and vanquish his enemies with just his intelligence fascinated him. Joe went on to earn a graduate degree and had several careers before writing his debut novel, IQ, inspired by his early experiences and his love of Sherlock Holmes. His books are Smoke, IQ, Righteous, Wrecked, and High Five. He lives in Santa Monica, California. And the reason I wanted to have Joe back is because back in January, I don't think any of you came to the workshop, that he did a workshop for the Orange County chapter of Sisters in Crime, and it was so good that I wanted to have him back for you. So Joe, take it away.
Hi. This is how to write a killer crime novel, or how to up your odds of getting published. Before I start, just a little background. I grew up in South Central LA, an area that was full of crime and gangs and all the inherent problems of the hood. But, you know, as an experience, it wasn't any different than what millions of kids go through every day. My grandparents, they lived in the area because it was close to Little Tokyo, and my family lived with them because we were just getting by. My grandparents were very old world. They spoke almost no English. They were very stern and very formal and very traditional. My grandfather collected samurai swords, and my grandmother had a koi pond and wore these beautiful silk kimonos around the house. And they treated me like somebody else's cat. You know what I mean? Like they couldn't actually kill me, but they didn't have to be nice to me either. My parents aspired to get out of the hood and be Brady Bunch mainstream, and that's what they wanted for their kids, me and my brothers. But we'd adapted to the neighborhood. You know, most of our friends were Black, so we co-opted their speech style, attitudes, musical taste, all of that. So there was always this cultural generational tension, you know, within the family, made more so by the fact that both my parents and my grandparents, you know, they wanted us to have some connection to our own cultural heritage, which never really worked out the way they'd hoped. My parents, they made me take a ceramics class in Little Tokyo. It was taught by this, you know, very famous artist. He was from Japan, a friend of my grandfather's. So I get there, and there's 8 or 10 of these obsessively clean-cut suburban Japanese kids. And there I am, you know, toothpick in my mouth and wearing my Ray-Bans indoors. And I know I have got to get out of this. So here's what I did. Everything I made was somehow phallic. You know, it wasn't obvious, but it wasn't subtle either. You know, it'd be like an ordinary teapot, but you wouldn't necessarily want to pick it up by the handle. My older brother, Jack, he got tossed out of a Japanese Boy Scout troop for buying his merit badges. You know, he didn't really get the whole Boy Scout concept. You know, my brother, he had him running up and down his arms. I'm 4 years younger. I'm really jealous because my parents are just, you know, they're so proud of him. And what made it all the more aggravating was I knew it was a scam. I knew my brother couldn't paddle around in a kayak or build a wigwam. And so the net result of all of this was that I was culturally all over the place. You know, wasn't Black, wasn't white, way far from being Japanese. So through much of that time, I didn't fit in. I didn't belong anywhere. And I think that's why I was so drawn to the original Sherlock Holmes. You know, here's a guy like me, you know, he's a misfit, he doesn't belong, not a badass. And here he's able, you know, to face his world and not be afraid with just his brain. You know? And for a kid like me, you know, small kid, big neighborhood, it was a kind of hope. You know, it meant there was a way for a small kid in a big neighborhood to make his way and not be afraid. And when it came time to write a book, all those elements came together almost by themselves. And Sherlock in the Hood was born. So the workshop. The subtitle of the class is How to Up Your Odds of Being Published. I say that because publishing is the most competitive business there is. You know, in my genre alone, there are thousands upon thousands of books already in print, not to mention the hundreds of books that come out, you know, new books come out every week. So if you get a book published at all, congratulations. That's a feat, that's an accomplishment, and you should be proud of yourself. But if your intention, if your aspiration is to be a career novelist, make your living writing books, it is a whole other level. For starters, you want to be published by one of the big houses. You know, they pay more, they have bigger budgets to promote your book. That's not to say a smaller house can't build your career. Many have, but we're talking about upping the odds. For a new writer, it's almost impossible to cut through the book noise as well as every other kind of entertainment noise. So to up your odds, you need a publishing company that's behind you, that believes in your book, you know, to invest their resources, their money in you. They really have to think, this is a good book, this will sell. You know, publishing isn't some philanthropic effort on behalf of literature. It's a business. And they're looking for a great product. There's a finite number of dollars in the marketplace. So if you make a sale, you have to take one away from somebody else. You know, so there I am in my favorite independent bookstore, choosing between Michael Connelly, Laura Lippman, and John Sanford, say, and you, the new guy. Well, you're going to lose that contest unless you have the goods. There's buzz, there's media coverage, there are great reviews. Otherwise, it will be one more okay novel. You know, the publishing company won't spend any money. It's in Barnes and Nobles for a week and then it's gone. So if your ambition, again, if this is your ambition to be a career novelist, to up your odds, your book needs to be killer. Writing novels is a career, profession like any other. Whether it's being a nurse or a veterinarian or a blacksmith, it's multiple skill sets learned over a long period of time. Aspiring writers don't like to hear that long period of time thing, but name a profession that doesn't take a long time to master. You know, there's just no way around it. You hear somebody say, I'm going to write a bestseller in 6 months. You know, and what other line of endeavor would that apply? You know, I'm going to be a great carpenter 6 months and build a house. In 6 months, you're going to cut your arm off with a bandsaw. Oh, it's going to take a long time. There's just no way around it. It's one of those things in life. Commit or don't commit. Lots of aspiring writers assume because they can write other things, they can write a novel. That's not true. You know, because you can play golf doesn't mean you can play tennis. You know, they're different skill sets. You hear gurus say 12 steps to writing, you know, a bestseller. How many steps are there to become a successful teacher? There are no steps. It's just a lot of hard work and experience. Your gatekeepers are the agents and editors. These are your judges. You can't get anything past them. They've read everything, believe me, everything, and they spent their lives reading and evaluating books. And nobody gives you a break because you're new or because you have great potential at some point in the future. Your book either stands up to scrutiny or it doesn't. And however hard you are on yourself, they're going to be harder. This one's important. The biggest thing standing between an aspiring writer and getting published is the writing itself, separate and apart from content. If you don't write at a professional level, nothing else will save you. not story, character, possible franchise. You have a lot of great ideas. None of that matters because the gatekeeper only has the page in front of him and nothing else. You know, again, if the writing's not there, you're just done. You know, I mean, it's like applying for a job at NASA and saying, you know what, I skipped all the aeronautic stuff. You know, it was too much math. You know, it was really complicated. How do you know? How do you know if you're writing at a professional level? Well, if you don't know, you probably don't. A little test. You know, take the first 5 pages of your favorite writer and read them out loud. That's important. Read them out loud, and you will hear that professional smoothness. Then take your 5 pages and read them out loud. And if you're anything like me, you're going to hear clunks and clanks, and it'll just be a terrible experience. And it was for me. It brings me to the point of criticism. You have to be open to it. You have to be open to it. And you know, if you're in a writing group or something like that, then you know, don't ask, do you like it? Ask, do you think the writing is at a professional level? And if you, otherwise, you know, you have work to do. When I first started writing IQ, my narrative prose was terrible, just awful. You know, I made every single mistake you can make. I had to go back to the beginning, you know, reading Elements of Style, and there's a couple other classics that elude me at the point, but I went back to the beginning. I mean, it was humbling, but necessary. It took me a year to learn how to write clear, decent prose, and then 2 more years to finish the book. You're only going to get one chance to put your book in front of a real gatekeeper. 2 if you live long enough. Don't blow it. Don't get your book out there too soon. You know, new writers get ahead of themselves. You know, they think about agents and marketing and movie options. The book comes first. Write the great book. New writers hurry. You know, they're anxious to, you know, for the money and the glory, and that's cool. Those are my motivations too. But if you go to market with a mediocre book, then all that hurrying didn't matter. Many new writers think that somebody's going to steal their idea. Ideas are highly overrated. You know, Michael Connelly, Louise Penny, Robert B. Parker, detective case. It's the execution that counts. A high concept idea will help, but the book's got to be there. Writer friend Felicia Yep, she wrote a book called Yesterday. Here's the one-liner. A woman has to solve a murder, but she can only remember what happened yesterday. It's cool. That's cool. But she wouldn't have solved it unless she executed, and she's a terrific writer. Disabuse yourself of the notion that the publishers are looking for something in particular. You might hear somebody say, we're looking for the next Harry Bosch, but what they mean is, we're looking for the next Michael Connelly. You know, they're looking for writers who can sustain a career, write quality book after quality book. Reagan Arthur, the publisher at Knopf, said, I want what all publishers want, great writing and a fresh voice. Publishers know they can't anticipate what the marketplace wants because the marketplace doesn't know what it wants. You see advertisements for books and seminars, find out what's hot, you know, fantasy, YA, sci-fi. Everything is hot if you write a great book. You remember that book, The Life of Pi? It was about an Indian Tamil boy who spent months on a life raft with a Bengal tiger named Richard Parker. How's that for an idea? Try pitching that. It sold 10 million copies. Money. Advances from one of the big 5 range from $25,000 on the low end, $100,000 on the high end. $100,000 is very rare. The $1 million deals are too rare to be relevant. Most land between $35,000 and $40,000. I got a $100,000 advance for 2 books. And the only reason I got a little more is because my agent's a big deal and they didn't want to piss her off. Here's how the deal broke down. Okay, this is for IQ. I got $40,000 up front. 20 was for IQ and 20 was for the next book. Then I got 15,000 to when I finished the rewrites to my editor's satisfaction. That took months because rewriting is just a long process. And my editor has a number of other writers that he's editing and dealing with. And then I got another $15,000 on publication day. So these payments that were stretched out over a year added up to $70,000. Less 15% from my agent and whatever the taxes were, and I got what I got. And before you get a dime of royalties, you got to pay back the advance. On the first 5,000 books, you get 10% royalty. On the second 5,000, you get 12.5, and on the rest, you get 15. Man, you got to sell a lot of books to pay back 100K. I mean, IQ was hot out of the gate, and that first year, I made $10,000 and change in royalties. You know, what happens is your third novel, people like it, so they go back and buy the first and the second, and that's how you pick up momentum, and that's how you make money. And that's why you have to write book after book to make a living. You know, and that's why publishers are looking for writers who are good enough to sustain a career. My point here is be realistic about money. TV and movie options. I talked to my agent who does books to media. I told him I wanted people to be realistic, you know, about what to expect. And he said, you want to be realistic, you're not going to sell it. Meaning, options are very rare despite what you read and see. You know, in the context of thousands of submissions. The producer of the IQ TV show, he's a major producer, and he said average fee from a major producer, option fee, goes from $500 to $7,500. There was a 6-way bidding war for IQ, and I got $22,500, which my agent said was extraordinary for a new writer. Less 15% commission and taxes, and I got what I want. Got what I got. My point is, you know, be realistic about money. Okay, nuts and bolts. Caveat. I'm going to say you should do this and you should do that. But what I mean is, this is the way I do things. This is the way I solve writing problems. There are many, many other writers out there who do things in completely different ways. And they're very successful. So just bear that in mind. This is just me. Character. Every aspect of your book stems from character. You know, you're following, the reader's following the character through a plot. And so that character has to be someone they can invest in. That's what they follow, not the plot. Developing those characters has a lot to do with empathy, your ability to put yourself inside the head of your character, if you and see the world the way they see it. Because if you don't do that, if you can't do that, you don't understand motivation. So how do you know what that character is going to do or say in any given scene? Let's say you come home and there's your significant other sprawled out on the couch watching TV. And the very first thing you do is make a judgment. He is such an incredible slob. You know, how much effort is it to put on both slippers? You know, why even wear a robe if you're not going to close it in the front? Now, instead of asking yourself writer's questions, you know, why is there a vacant look in his eyes? Why is he watching a program he doesn't like? Why is he wearing a bathrobe at 5 p.m? From this moment on, you're a student of human nature. And basically what this means is, shut up. Stop talking. Watch, listen. You go to a social situation, you don't need to tell your favorite anecdotes, and nobody needs to hear them. No, you're no longer a participant. You are a spy. If you watch and listen, you can see who's lying, who's got a hidden agenda, who's intimidated, who's a drinker, who's breaking up. And you're trying to imagine motivation, like why they're doing what they're doing. Because this is what you're doing when you develop a character. I look for little details, facial tells, voice inflection, posture, attitude. Woman friend of mine said, you can't tell a woman's economic status by her clothes anymore because everybody wears jeans and Nikes, but you can almost always tell by the handbag. I like that a lot. I want to use it somewhere. I walk my dog about the same time every day. And so I'm walking, neighbor lady comes out of her house. And I know that she's waiting for me. She was waiting for me because she's a little too eager, she's walking a little too quickly for, going to get the mail. And we converge on the sidewalk and she immediately starts telling me about her trip to India. I took a raft, up the Ganges. I ate street food. I didn't get sick. I went to the temple with all the rats and stuff. And I'm thinking, she's not telling me about her trip to India. She's saying, look how adventurous I am. I'm a risk taker. I'm not just a rich lady lying around in my house. I'm out there in the world. And because I know that, I could write about her. There's an ongoing character in the IQ series named Rhonda. She's a homegirl through and through. Came up hard, grew up on the streets. And when I wrote the first book, I needed an attitude, for her, a stance, that she takes vis-a-vis the world. My first girlfriend, Stephanie Farrington, lived 2 doors down from me. She was 12, so I guess I was 11. Stephanie was a head and a half taller than me, and she outweighed me by 30 pounds. My brother said that when we held hands, she looked like a ventriloquist with a Japanese monkey, a dummy. I always thought that was a tad harsh. Everybody in the neighborhood was struggling, but Stephanie's family was destitute. There was never any food in her house. She had a little brother, a little sister, always running around half naked, crying, and her mother was an alcoholic. She walked around with a sawed-off broomstick and just sort of whacked whoever was closest. Stephanie came out of this with a certain attitude, and that is, whatever it is, whatever I get in this life, I'll have to take it. And whatever it is, it won't be good enough. Wrong size, wrong color, not the one she wanted, not the one she saw in the store, and on and on and on. She would complain about everything. I used to share my lunch with her, and she'd complain about the sandwiches because nothing would ever fill that empty well of needs or make up for her life of poverty and despair. And because I knew Stephanie, I could write to Rhonda. There's a tendency to define characters by two things. One is lifestyle. He lives in a penthouse, drives a Maserati, lives in a log cabin, drives an old Jeep. The other is expertise. He can pilot a helicopter and deep sea dive, and he knows all these weapons and martial arts. That's fine. I use that stuff myself. But that's not the essence of character. The essence of character is what that character is thinking and feeling while they're doing whatever it is they're doing. I'm not all that interested in a character who throws people off rooftops. I can throw somebody off a rooftop. What interests me is what that character is thinking and feeling before, during, and after he throws somebody off a rooftop. And that's what will distinguish that character from every other character who throws people off rooftops. You know, I tell aspiring writers that there are no new ways to kill people. You know, you're not going to impress anybody with cannibalism or, you know, poison suppositories or anything else. But the guy who thought, you know, a poison suppository was a good idea, he's of interest, but only if you can impart in him some element of humanity. In the third book in the series, Wrecked, the bad guy is a man named Walzak. Ex-CIA, committed atrocities in Abu Ghraib, runs a big security company like Blackwater, so he knows he's powerful, ruthless, and there's absolutely nothing new there. Walzak is hunting for a woman named Sarah. She has photos of him at Abu Ghraib doing horrible things, and this is his reflection. He envisioned the photos appearing in the New York Times and on CNN. He could see the media outrage metastasizing to every country in the world, his name synonymous with cruelty, depravity, and perversion. The most excruciating part, his family. The business was Earth and he was Atlas, but his family was his only true source of happiness and the only people he knew who still saw him as a patriot, a hero, and a great human being. He had to destroy those pictures. The thought of his darling wife, Patty, seeing him rape a helpless woman made him sick. The thought of his precious son, Noah, knowing his father was a monster, made him want to die. He'd never been so afraid. Not when the desert night was lit with tracer rounds and the mortar shells exploded so close you thought you were finished and you could hear your fellow soldiers screaming and dying in the rubble. None of it frightened him more than the revelation of his beastly heart. Excuse me. I don't have that. I don't have a character. A writer named John Rogers wrote, "You don't really understand an antagonist until you realize he's a protagonist in his own world." And I think that's true. If you ask a drug dealer if he's a bad guy, he'll say, "No, I'm not a bad guy. I'm just taking care of business. You know, I'm looking after my own like everybody else." Objectives. Before you write anything, you have to ask yourself, what am I trying to say here? What's my objective? Am I moving the story forward, revealing character, advancing a relationship, creating atmosphere? You know, a lot of aspiring writers just write and write and write and write, and they end up with something incoherent. This is from IQ, chapter 1, first paragraph. I have multiple objectives here. I want to tell the reader where we are without a big description of the hood. I want to create conflict between Isaiah and his environment. I also want to intrigue the readers. I want to invite them to read the next page. Isaiah's crib looked like every other house on the block, except the lawn was cut even, the paint was fresh, and the entrance was a little unusual. You'll note I use the word crib instead of house. That's a clue. And if your house is distinguished because the lawn is cut even, you're not in Beverly Hills. The security screen was made from the same heavy-duty mesh they used to cage in crackheads and bank robbers at the Long Beach police station, another reference to where we are. The front door was covered with a thin walnut veneer, but underneath was a 20-gauge steel core set in a cold steel frame with a pick-proof, bump-proof, drill-proof, medical double-cylinder high-security Maxim deadbolt. You need some pretty serious power tools to get past all that, and even if you did, there was no telling what you'd be into. Word was the place was booby-trapped. Okay, we know where we are. I've done that. There's conflict. Isaiah's house is in conflict with the neighborhood. It's discrepant, suggesting that he's discrepant too, and intriguing the reader. I want the reader to ask, who needs a door like that? Who needs a lock like that? Why would anybody think the place is booby-trapped? And most importantly, who lives behind that door? Objectives. Again, have one for every paragraph. conflict. The adage is true, conflict is story, story is conflict. And there should be conflict in every scene. I mean, that's a paradigm, of course, but every scene. Two people are talking pleasant, but underneath, there's something else going on. I covet your wife. I hate you. I'm going to kill you tomorrow. Because if there isn't that undercurrent, then they're just chatting or it's expository. Nothing is easy. Nothing. Guy drives to work. There's traffic. He's late. He forgot his briefcase. He's worried because his kid is sick. Otherwise, he's just driving to work. Character enters her apartment, turns on the light, but it doesn't work. Why? Where's her cat? She's an alcoholic and there's no booze in the house, so she's waiting for a call and the call doesn't come. You're trying to create that tension and maintain that tension throughout the entire book. When a book flags, that's one of the reasons. The writer let go of that tension. Pace. Another reason a book lags is because not enough happens, and that's probably the most common. You take Michael Connelly. Something happens every other page. He's talking to a witness, he argues with his captain, he calls his partner, he needs some more evidence, he does research, bam, 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 one thing after another. And it doesn't have to be events. Look at The Road, Cormac McCarthy won a Pulitzer. It's a dystopian future after the apocalypse. Everything is burned up, no lakes, no birds, no nothing, so there's nothing to talk about. A man and a boy are traveling on the road trying to get somewhere better. There are no other major characters to talk to. The boy is a boy, has a limited vocabulary. Half the book is the man's interior dialogue. Memories, regrets, relationships lost, practical questions like, how do we avoid the bandits? We need food, where are we going to find it? And I tell you, there's all the pace you will ever need. Emotion. When I imagine a scene, I'm looking for the emotional stakes, like Walzack. When I write action scenes, I want the reader to have an intense experience, but I also want it to be about more than kicks and punches. In High Five, the book that came out last year, there are hired killers in the story, two women, Sal and Annie, longtime partners. This is the scene. Sal was getting angry. She set the beer down. You better shut up now, Annie. They went quiet. There's a particular kind of stillness before a fight starts, a moment where you either reconsider or the shit is on. Annie backed up 3 steps, giving herself room. Sal tensed, bent her knees. The shit was on. Annie lowered her voice and spoke steadily without pause. Don't tell me to shut up, Sal. You won't ever tell me to shut up, you stupid bitch. I'm not afraid of you. Who you think you are, you stupid fucking bitch? You want to get into it? Let's go. Annie didn't raise her voice, but the words were getting louder. Sal was breathing hard, her head expanding, her pulse like a war drum, her anger coiling into fury. Annie didn't stop. I'll fuck you up. Do you hear me, Sal? I'll kick your ass. So go ahead and make a move. I'm fucking ready for you. I've always been ready for you. You don't mean shit to me, and you never did, you stupid fucking bitch. Shut up, Annie. Fuck you, shut up, you fucking cunt. Why don't you bring your fat ass over here and make me? But you won't because you're a stupid fucking cunt. Something broke inside of Sal. A pressure gauge, a release valve. Blindly, wildly, she charged. She grabbed Annie by the shirt and took a punch in the face, threw her into the credenza, a lamp crashing to the floor. Annie was up in an instant, a fucking instant. Annie was fierce and unafraid, a killer who had killed many times before, but so had Sal. They faced each other. Every slight, insult, contemptuous look, every dismissive remark, scowl of disapproval and derisive laugh, boiling up inside of them, a surging, ruthless energy as unstoppable as an axe descending on a prisoner's neck. Violence between lovers was never about the present, Sal thought. Each of them was proof of their own fucked up lives. Each was to blame. for their barren futures. Emotion is what the readers key in on. You know, we want to feel something when we read. And, you know, when a book, they call a book a roller coaster ride, those are the emotions. Dialogue. Each of your characters should have a distinct way of speaking. Vocabulary, syntax, word choices, cadence, just like your friends and family, or your favorite characters, whether it's Philip Marlowe or Chili Palmer or Miss Marple. The way they speak is one of the things that make them memorable. And, you know, even the billion seller writers write generic dialogue. If you took away the names, you wouldn't know who's speaking. Juan L. Dodson is my favorite character to write. He's an ex-hustler. He's slick, opportunistic, very self-involved. But in Wrecked, he has a new baby boy, and the responsibility is overwhelming for a guy like this. Here, he talks it over with Isaiah. "In this flaming sun," Dodson said, he strolled in like the landlord, an icy breeze with an attitude, condensed of stature, but walking large. "So what's up with you?" "None special," Isaiah said. "How's Micah?" Dodson made a face like he was remembering a car accident. "Man, that baby is work. You know he can't do nothing for himself. Can't even hold his oversized head up. You got to watch him all the damn time." "You didn't know that going in," Isaiah said. "Knowing and doing is two different things. You know, Sharice makes me wash my hands every time I pick him up. I don't keep my toothbrush that clean. And the kid is always spitting up and he farts like he's full of propane. I couldn't believe it first time I changed his diaper. He don't eat nothing but mother's milk and his shit's the same color as hot dog mustard. And for some reason, we always hurrying and rushing around. Well, I couldn't tell you. Damn baby ain't no bigger than a pot roast and he ain't going nowhere. And everything's a damn crisis. The boy gets a rash on his ass and Sharice and the mama carry on like he had a tumor on his neck. I said, what y'all worried about? Everybody gets a rash on their ass one time or another. I got a rash on my ass right now." "How did that go over?" Isaiah said. "Like I farted at a funeral." You're not going to mistake Dodson for anybody else. You know, Elmore Leonard said, "Everybody talks," meaning everybody's articulate in their own vernacular. Everybody, even an ex-hustler. And the effect of this is to elevate the character. You know, Dodson's no longer, you know, a hustler. He's this hustler. He's this particular hustler. I use backstories to build character. You know, I think backstories help in terms of understanding the circumstances that brought a character to this point in their lives, you know, on the brink, willing to make extreme choices. Emmeline Owens was in military intelligence, one of Walzak's team. She did terrible things at Abu Ghraib, and you know, she was dishonorably discharged, and she was looking forward to a long career in the military. This is Owens. Owens worked behind the bakery counter at Vaughn's, putting lemon tarts and banana cream pies into the display cases, spelling out "Happy Birthday, Grandpa" on chocolate cakes. Owens had volunteered for 9/11 because she wanted to help her country. She wanted to make a difference, be a patriot. Then she got over there, and what she was doing felt disconnected from anything to do with country or patriotism. It was like the house was on fire and you were somewhere else pulling weeds. And that was what she brought back with her, that disconnectedness, the feeling that you had separated yourself from the human race. And now you were something apart and broken and alone. She wanted Jimenez. Who else would have her? No normal man could know what she'd done and not leave in disgust. Owens is damaged, and it's that damage that makes her a character. Rewriting. Rewriting is not rereading. It becomes this, self-congratulatory process where you're kind of going, yeah, I like this. Yeah, this is okay. Yeah, I'll tweak this. when you're rewriting, you're asking yourself two questions. And the first one is, what's wrong? You know, what's clunky? What doesn't work? What doesn't need to be here? What doesn't make sense or follow logical? Second question is, how can I make this better, clearer, more exciting, intense, funnier, better written? You know, if you're rewriting a page and you don't find three things wrong that don't work, you're not working hard enough. Right? And you're going to find three wrong things the next time. I rewrote the prologue in IQ. I think it's, I don't know, 2 pages long. I rewrote it 26 times, 7 different takes, and then I rewrote those because I knew who the gatekeepers were. I knew what their standards were. I knew that going in. You know, I don't think you should be as obsessive as all that. But you're rewriting, you know, time after time after time, and again, to hone it and get it really sharp. You know, I heard an aspiring writer say, you know, I rewrote it 3 times. And I'm thinking, well, that's a good start. Pet peeve. If you use common idioms and phrases like, it's not rocket scientists and blessing in disguise and through thick and thin and, you know, a drop of a hat, 2 peas in a pond, then you're the laziest bunch of writers in the history of literature. Make up your own. You're a writer, you know? And I'm telling you, that kind of stuff just flattens out your writing. People don't even read it, you know? It makes you generic. Go through the pages and cross out everything, you know, that looks like, you know, that is something like that. And if you're anything like me, you know, the page will look like it was redacted by the CIA. What to do if you're stuck? I find it helpful to be the character. You know, if Isaiah's running away from the police, I'm in the car. I'm driving the car. I can see the road ahead of me. I can hear the sirens. And because I'm driving the car, I can see what the options are. You know, drive over the cliff, surrender, make a U-turn, whatever it is. There are only going to be so many options in front of me if I'm the character. And when they say, you know, a book is character driven, it means the plot goes forward based on the character's decisions. The character decides to rob a bank and robs a bank. You know, the character decides to rescue the kid and rescues the kid. So if you're stuck, don't ask yourself what's next. Ask yourself, what would the character decide to do in this situation? And you're doing that for all the characters. So you know their positions in the story and you know what their actions might be. Of course, you should read, but it's different for you. Study what you read. All the masters are right there on your bookshelves. You want to understand suspense? Read Joe Nesbo. You know, he cranks up the tension until you can't stand it anymore, and he cranks it up some more. If you read him carefully, you can see how he layers in the elements and is able to build this tension. And you know, at first you don't even see it coming. No. But he's able to just crank it up and crank it up. It's really amazing. But you should come away with the blueprint. You know, how did he do this? Same with dialogue. Read Elmore Leonard. You know, he can write, and he has written like 5 pages of dialogue. You never get a physical description of the character, but you know exactly who he is and what he looks like. Historical sweep. Read Tom Rob Smith, Child 44. That's almost a perfect novel. You want to learn how to write simply but effectively, not a whole bunch of flourishes like me. Thomas Perry. Read The Butcher's Boy. or almost anything of his. Butcher's Boy, one of the best thrillers I've ever read. And again, if this is your profession, you know, you should have a relentless curiosity about your craft. When a med student is examining a cadaver, you know, he or she's not just poking around in there, you know, asking themselves, how does this work? Vocabulary. All of you have wide speaking vocabularies, but many aspiring writers have a very limited writing vocabulary. Words are your tools. I use the thesaurus at least, literally, at least 5 times a page. There's always a better word, more precise, more vivid, clear. You know, there are a million synonyms for fight, kill, run, shoot, and practically everything else. You know? And as you're choosing words, this becomes part of your style. Choosing the right word, because you and I wouldn't choose the same word. It becomes, your writing becomes recognizable. A voice. For a long time, I didn't know what that meant. I mean, other people had their definitions, but I didn't have mine. And I figured it out, at least I could articulate it, when I was rewriting the second book. When I'm rewriting, I make literally thousands of decisions. Turn left, turn right, red hat, blue hat, cut this paragraph. I missed something here. There's an opportunity to write about something more. And, you know, I've had practice, you know, articulating the questions I'm asking myself and the decisions that I'm making. It's more instinctive now. But I think cumulatively, those thousands of decisions are your voice, because no one would make the same decisions as you. But that assumes you asked the thousands of questions that led to the thousands of decisions. No rigor, no work ethic, no voice. It's guaranteed. Finally, there's nothing glamorous or romantic about being a novelist, despite the background. You know, when I'm writing, I'm not lounging on a deck chair, you know, with a glass of white wine and you know, looking out at the ocean view. Here's my day. I wake up around 7:30, drink 3 cups of coffee. I sit down and work. You know, there I am wearing my pajamas, you know, taco juice on the keyboard and talking to my dog. And that's my day. You know, I work until about 1 in the afternoon. Then I go do whatever I have to do. I come back to it around 4 and put in another couple of hours. And I do that every day, 7 days a week, like most writers I know. You know, I write a lot of subplots, a lot of characters. And if I let go of that and just take 2 days off, it's really hard getting momentum back. When I was touring, you know, I went to different cities to speak. And that's fun, you know, get a lot of love and people pay attention to you. But if I took all the events, less travel time, put them all together, it comes to about 2 weeks. You know? You really have to love to write to do this job. If you sort of kind of like to write, it's going to be very hard to sustain yourself for 300 pages. You know, it's like saying, I'm going to win the New York Marathon, and I sort of kind of like to run. You know, my ankles hurt, I get sweaty. You know, you have to be honest with yourself. You know, is this something you really want to do? Can you put in the time? Can you put in the effort, the commitment? And I'll tell you, writing, like many things, becomes a passion. You know, you don't have some, you know, instinctive need necessarily to want to write. You start writing, and the better you get, the more self-rewarding it is. you write a paragraph and you go, yeah, you rewrite it and you still like it. Hell, it becomes self-rewarding the better that you get. I wrote IQ in increments, which is something I would suggest to you. When you're looking out over a 300-page book, it's really daunting, really daunting to do that. Outlining helps, but when you're sitting down, to actually write, and there's a blank page in front of you, that was daunting to me. And what I did was I wrote the first page. I wrote my opening scene, the thing about the door in the house. I rewrote it until I thought it was what I wanted. I thought it was pretty good. And that set the standard for the rest of the book. I couldn't write any worse than that. And writing that first page informed the second page. It told me what to do on page 2. And I wrote page 2. And as I went along, if you go that carefully, the scenes start to connect and you start to develop, a sense of where you're going and what the character is doing. And I started to write in bigger and bigger increments, 5 pages, 10 pages. It's different now, but I found that, writing in increments really helped me and just helped me get out of that mental state where I'm going, what the fuck's going to happen for 300 pages? I don't know. And you can't outline 300 pages. You just can't do it, especially if you're new. So I found that helpful. I found that helpful in terms of starting your first book. Writing novels is just one of those things in your life. Commit or don't commit. If you have questions, I'll try and answer them.
Anybody? Marla?
So did you ever have a character that was really difficult to develop, and what did you do to have that character cooperate?
With IQ, I wrote the first page. And I started to see, okay, where does Isaiah live? And the questions are very small here. I'm only writing the first page. Where does he live? What's his house like? And I started to fill in those details about where he lives. And so I have this discrepant house in the neighborhood. And then I'm writing the second page, and how is his house decorated? How does the discrepant guy decorate his house? And I ended up with a very stark living room, polished cement floor, minimal furniture, wall full of LPs. And I'm slowly defining him. Then he has his first conversation with Deronda, who's trying to hit on him. How would he speak? How would a guy like this, with a serious IQ, how would he speak? And so I started to write dialogue, and it ended up that he speaks in short declarative sentences most of the time. He's very curt, bordering on blunt. And I'm always thinking, this character is distinct because he's really smart. And so the things he says aren't kind of the, Sherlock Holmes kinds of thing where he knows, the kind of caterpillar is crawling on his wall. But apropos to the scene. And so now I had how he speaks. Okay? And how does he deal with people? Deronda wants a ride home. So he gives her a ride home. And we see his car. Very plain car. It's gray, no rims, in a neighborhood that, worships rims. And we see how he speaks to Deronda. And Deronda says, I want to be famous. Oh, and Isaiah says, famous for what? And she says, you know, that Kardashian girl made 30 million last year. My booty could fit inside her booty. And so now I'm defining Deronda, right? Her stance on the world. I'm going slowly. I'm going slowly. And I don't know what car he's going to drive till I get to the car. And then he's driving through this neighborhood. We get a little more extensive view of the neighborhood, and he's observing. He's making really sharp observations about his neighborhood. And so that's the way I developed him. That's the way I developed everybody else. As you write, you think of things. The best things that come to me are when I'm writing. And it's asking those questions. What kind of car does he drive? How does he speak? But if I approach that problem inside a scene, it's much easier to formalize because I'm not trying to write, his life history. And as he speaks, you get the idea that he's educated. He doesn't speak in the vernacular, not educated necessarily, but he's not a homeboy. And so that's how I developed him. He meets his first problem, and how would he approach this problem? How would he approach the case? What would he think? And so that's the process. That's how I build a character. Write the scene that he or she is in, and ask yourself, how does that character behave within this scene? It was much easier for me to do it that way.
Joe, how much did you know about him though before you began? Because it sounds like you don't do character profiles, right? Like you're
No.
discovering who they are as you're writing. But how
Yes.
much do you need to know before you start?
I don't know anything when I start a new character.
Hmm.
Like Walzak, I knew he was a bad guy, and he was very powerful and ruthless. I wanted him to be that way. But when I started writing his scenes is when I started developing the way he speaks. This very elaborate military way of speaking. He's ex-CIA. And as I wrote him in the first couple of scenes, I had to write his dialogue. He's coming through a speakerphone. So how would an asshole speak? He's very officious, I decided, right then as I'm writing it. He's officious. He's a lot about doing things in his mind properly. He despises his underlings. And I'm doing this as I write the first scene. And I'm writing his underlings the same way. What's their attitude toward this officious son of a bitch? And so I don't know anything. I don't know anything about the book, really. When I wrote High Five, the client is a girl with multiple personalities. And I got that idea. I happened to watch Three Faces of Eve and Sybil in the same week. And I thought, well, that'd be a pretty interesting character. They have to relate the 5 personalities in one, but I didn't know what she would be like, So I write her first scene, and there's the main personality, and I wanted her to be quiet and shy, and but smart inside her head, and tortured inside her head. But I didn't know that till I got there. And then I have to portray her apartment. So 5 different personalities living in the same house. What's the house like? It's a mess with 17 different kinds of decor. But I didn't know that till I got there. And somebody else had a question.
Jennifer.
Oh, I just, when you read from your book, with the characters that were arguing and he called her a cunt, and I'm like, God, I don't like this guy. What a,
Mm-hmm.
and then you turned it around and you had him reflect on who he was. And I actually felt sorry for the character within one paragraph,
That's right. Mm.
So you talk about that roller coaster and keeping it real
Mm-hmm.
without elaborate, without making it so emotional that it becomes sort of a
Yeah.
wash, you know? It's,
Yeah.
I-
These are two longtime lovers, longtime partners, and they're in a profession where they kill people. And this has, I'm thinking that, you know, it's a pretty stressful job, so they're not exactly calm, reasoned people. Killing people would wreak havoc on a relationship. And so, again, I'm developing this while I'm writing. And then I get to this scene where they have to fight. And what are they really fighting about? You see any fight on the street. And you watch the fight and you understand that this is not about, you know, I can kick your ass. It's not about kicking your ass. It's about something going on inside the character. You know, two homeboys get into it, man, they're not fighting just to fight. It's about the way they grew up. You know, it's about the culture they're in. But I think of these things as I'm writing it. And the same with those two. Longtime partners, their lives are in tatters, and they live from job to job, and they don't really get paid that much. And they're ashamed of themselves. I kill people for a living. And in a fight, especially in a relationship, usually a fight in a relationship, long-term relationship, is not about the present. You know, people start arguing and yelling at each other, it's because the history of the relationship. And people tend to blame the shortcomings in their own lives on the other person. That's what happens. But that, you know, it goes back to that being a student of human nature. If I see two people arguing, man, I get as close as I can. I don't go around them. If there's any kind of confrontation, I'm there. I'm right there. And you pick up a lot that way. But that roller coaster there, I'm just writing the fight first. And then I'm thinking, well, what's this about? What's it about? And that's how I went from fight to something on another level. And you will too.
I have a question. When
Sure.
when do you show your stuff to someone, and when don't you?
Again, work in increments. Right? Get yourself a good 5 pages, 10 pages, but a short increment. Right? And then give them to people. And don't give them to your spouse or your partner. Okay. You're just not going to get a fair read. You're just not. But give them to somebody who reads books. And again, don't ask if they like it. Ask, is the writing quality writing? Is this the kind of writing you would see in a book? Because as you're writing a story, you're also learning to write. And that's a difficulty about a new writer. The same difficulty I had. I'm trying to write a book. At the same time, I'm just trying to learn how to write. And so you have to get a read on your own writing skill, your skill level at writing a narrative. And that will help you fix your language as you're putting down a story. But both have to happen at the same time. It's, again, like I said, it's an arduous process. But you have to pay attention to the quality of your writing while you're putting the story down. And check yourself at increments. Don't give somebody 50 pages because they won't read it. You give them 10 pages. They'll read that. But give it to people who read and will be honest with you. I think a writing club is a good idea. Those clubs where, you know, you share your pages and then everybody speaks. I think those are really helpful. Most people don't even want criticism. You know, people are giving me stuff to read. They don't want my notes. They want affirmation.
Yeah.
They want encouragement. You know, just a story apropos of nothing. My dentist gave me a script to read. And get this, it was about a dentist who's actually a CIA agent. And this terrorist was coming in to get his teeth fixed. And the dentist, his assignment was to plant a little receiver in the guy's molars. Now, you know, the dentist didn't want my criticism. You know, he wanted me to say, wow, this is great. But you can't be that way. You have to invite criticism, invite it, but invite it from people who read.
Any other questions? Don't be afraid.
One book that helped you, Elements of Writing. I'm sorry,
Oh,
The Elements of
There were
Style.
two books. There were two books on writing well. I don't know who the author is, but on writing well.
William Zinsser.
Okay. And Elements of Style. I don't know that author either.
E.B.
But-
White.
Thank you. Those two books are really helpful, and they have, yeah, they're very clear and well written, and that really helped me. I read those again as I'm writing, and that thing about, you know, pet peeve and idioms and all that stuff. I got that from that book, and so I hastily took all those out of my writing. But those two books I found very helpful. The other book, an actual novel, again, was Thomas Perry's work, because he's short and clear, and he can do anything with very simple language. And again, that's what I was trying to, you know, get a handle on before I did my own thing.
Do you do any social media, or did you spend time doing any of that to promote yourself?
Yeah, I have Twitter and Facebook, and yeah, I do. I was forced to do it by my publisher. But it brings me to a thing about branding. You know, if you know, if you're a writer and you're trying to make yourself distinctive, well, I look at my posts as branding. And so I want to, if you post pictures, you know, a GIF of your cat doing the mambo and your favorite mac and cheese, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not actually making fun of that, but that's not making yourself stick out. That's saying, look, I'm like everybody else, because you're like everybody else, and so am I. But this is a different story. You're trying to make yourself stand up. So I try to put in things that are worth reading. I try not to pile on. I try not to be ubiquitous. And I just try and say things that aren't said by everybody. If you look at my Twitter feed, which I think is Joe Ide Tweets, there's a little piece in there about my grandfather. And it took me days to write that piece, but I wanted to put up something distinctive. And something that was memorable, that people wouldn't regret going, oh shit, I've heard this before. That's how I use social media. Or I laud other people's books. Ben Winters wrote The Quiet Boy, which I thought was one of the best books I ever read. That's on my Twitter feed. And the other thing I don't do is, if I'm getting nominated for an award or something, I don't say, I'm thrilled to get this, you know, be nominated for the, because what that implies is that you never got an award before. Nobody ever paid attention. You know, I just try to be short and grateful. And all of these things are going through my mind, branding and making myself unique while I'm doing social media. So.
Do you consider your audience, like the age, you know, who your readers will be when you're writing, or who are you appealing to? What generation or?
No. Great thing about being a novelist, one of the great things is you write what you want to write. And I think there's this false dichotomy between writing for yourself and writing for your audience. Writing for yourself means just that. You're writing what you want to write the way you want to write it. But writing for your audience means that you're communicating that in the clearest, most entertaining, professional way that you can. That's my obligation to the audience, to write well. You can't anticipate what the audience wants anyway. And you couldn't write that if you tried. You have to write a story that belongs to you.
Right.
Again, it's 300 pages. So if it isn't something you're really interested in putting on paper, very unlikely you're going to make it.
Right.
Well,
Any-
thank you. Thank you. Did you have another question?
I think we're good. Thank you so much. I put
bet. That's
Joe's
my
website address in the chat for you, and Joe Ide tweets.
It's
on-
my name, Joe Ide tweets, and joeide.com. You can remember that.
Yep, we can.
I'm afraid of all these little icons down here. I never done one of these things where I haven't screwed something up. So
Thank you so
And-
much.
Yeah, thank you.
you're very welcome. You're very welcome. And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.